Aluminum foil is welcomed in the American home in ever-growing quantities.
Do you remember those wild 1970s home features that seemed normal until you look back now? These quirky details filled every hallway, kitchen, and living room, shaping how our homes looked and felt every single day. How did we ever stop noticing the things that made them unforgettable? Sunken living rooms, also called conversation pits, were the ultimate mix of groovy style and impractical design. In the 1970s, you would step down a few inches, or sometimes a whole foot, into a recessed area in the middle of your living room, surrounded by low-slung couches that formed a cozy little nest. The idea was that everyone could sit at the same level, leaning in for deep talks over fondue or a record spinning on the turntable. It was meant to be intimate, but in reality, you spent half your time watching guests trip as they forgot to step down. These pits often came covered in the plushest carpet you could find, shag naturally, and the walls around them might be painted in rich earth tones or bold oranges and reds. Hosting in one of these felt modern and sophisticated, even if getting out of it took some effort. Kids loved running laps around the rim or diving into the cushions like it was their own personal playpen. Adults loved that it felt different, like a little architectural wink that said, "This house is not like the others." It was a bold statement piece you could not ignore, literally, since it was built into the floor. And while today it might seem like a hazard or a dated novelty, back then it was the height of stylish home entertaining. Orange and avocado green kitchens were not just popular, they were everywhere. Entire walls were painted in these earthy tones, and the appliances matched perfectly. The refrigerator, the oven, even the countertop blender could be avocado green or a bright burnt orange that practically glowed under the kitchen lights. It was all about warmth and coziness, reflecting the 1970s love for natural, organic colors, even if organic meant the shade of a ripe avocado or a bowl of citrus fruit. Wooden cabinets often had deep, dark stains, complementing the bold colors while making the space feel richer. It might seem shocking now, but back then, people thought these hues were timeless. Your morning toast popped up against a backdrop of green enamel, and your coffee pot steamed away beside an orange mixer. Families gathered in these kitchens for everything from breakfast to late-night snacks, surrounded by colors that felt vibrant and alive. These choices were not subtle. They were statements, and homeowners wore them proudly. Looking back, it is hard to believe anyone thought it would never go out of style. But in its day, an avocado green appliance was a badge of taste and modernity. Shag area rugs in wild colors were more than floor coverings. They were personality statements. These thick, fuzzy rugs came in oranges, yellows, bright reds, deep purples, basically any color that looked like it came straight out of a lava lamp. Walking barefoot on one felt like stepping into a field of soft grass if grass came in neon. They were meant to add warmth and texture to a room, but they often ended up stealing the spotlight entirely. A shag rug could take a neutral living room and instantly make it look like a page from a home decor catalog. The longer the fibers, the more luxurious it was considered, though it also meant you were finding mystery crumbs in there for years. Vacuuming them was practically a workout, and spills were a nightmare, but no one cared because they looked so fun. They anchored conversation areas, bedroom corners, or even bathrooms for the truly bold. Guests would inevitably sink their toes into the pile and comment on how soft it felt. These rugs were pure 1970s, colorful, indulgent, and just a little impractical. Round beds with mirrored ceilings were one of the most 1970s design choices you could possibly imagine. And yes, they were very real. The round bed was already unconventional, making any bedroom look like it belonged in a movie set or a futuristic hotel. But adding a mirrored ceiling above it? That took the drama to another level. Often paired with rotating bases or built-in headboards, these beds screamed luxury and excess. Satin sheets, shag carpeting surrounding the base, and maybe even a disco ball in the corner completed the scene. This was not the kind of furniture you bought for practicality. It was bought to impress, to make a statement, and to spark conversation. It was glamorous, a little risque, and very much a product of its time. Of course, making the bed was a nightmare, and finding round sheets required special ordering. But those who had them swore by the comfort and the undeniable wow factor. In the 1970s, having one of these meant you were living boldly. Harvest gold refrigerators were everywhere, just as much a part of 1970s kitchens as avocado green. The shade was somewhere between mustard yellow and warm caramel, and it looked particularly striking next to dark wood cabinets. Manufacturers sold entire appliance sets in this color, so you could have your fridge, stove, and dishwasher all matching perfectly. It was considered cheerful and homey, like a constant splash of sunlight in the kitchen. These fridges were built to last, often surviving decades without complaint. The color, however, aged a bit less gracefully. By the 1990s, they were the first thing to go during a remodel. But in their prime, they were the height of sophistication. Friends would compliment how modern it looked, and hosts would beam with pride over their matching set. The fact that so many of them still run today is a testament to how well they were built, function and fashion all in one. Wood paneling in every room was one of the most defining home trends of the 1970s. From living rooms to dens to basements, it covered walls in warm, dark tones that made spaces feel cozy, sometimes too cozy. The panels could be real wood or faux with that distinctive vertical groove pattern. Many families took pride in polishing and maintaining the panels, so they would always have that rich sheen. Some even hung framed art directly onto the paneling, the warm tones acting like a built-in backdrop. The faint woody smell it gave off could make the whole room feel like a rustic cabin retreat. In the right light, it could look rich and inviting. In the wrong light, it felt like the inside of a log cabin you could not escape. People loved how easy it was to install, instantly transforming plain drywall into something finished. It also hid imperfections and gave rooms that rustic meets modern vibe so many homeowners craved. Basements in particular seemed incomplete without it, paired with low-slung sofas and a massive console television. Sure, it darkened the space a bit, but it was worth it for the look. Even today, walking into a fully paneled room instantly transports you back to a 1970s family gathering. Patterned linoleum flooring was the unsung hero of 1970s kitchens and bathrooms. It came in bold geometric prints, faux brick, floral designs, you name it. It was durable, easy to clean, and often surprisingly soft underfoot. Some homeowners even coordinated their linoleum patterns with their kitchen curtains or wallpaper for a truly unified look. Children could spend hours tracing the repeating shapes with their fingers or toy cars. The colors stayed bright for years, giving kitchens a cheerful energy no matter the season. Homeowners loved that it could mimic expensive tile or stone for a fraction of the cost. Some patterns were subtle. Others were so loud they practically vibrated under the fluorescent lights. The kitchen table often sat right on top of it, surrounded by matching vinyl chairs. In bathrooms, it added a pop of style without the cold feel of tile. Linoleum was also a DIY favorite. You could install it yourself with a little patience and a lot of adhesive. The patterns might make you dizzy today, but back then they were considered fun, energetic, and full of life. Matching drapes and sofa fabric was a decorating move that made living rooms feel like one big coordinated outfit. The exact same floral or geometric pattern would cover the curtains and the couch cushions, sometimes even the armchairs. It was bold, it was committed, and it was very much a look. The effect was almost theatrical, as if you had stepped into a carefully designed stage set. Guests could not help but comment, whether they were impressed or overwhelmed. And for the homeowner, it was a point of pride, proof that every detail had been thought through. Guests would walk in and immediately notice the symmetry, whether they loved it or not. This style gave rooms a polished, put-together feel, as if the homeowner had consulted a professional decorator. The fabrics were often heavy and durable, meant to last through years of sun and wear. Color schemes leaned toward earthy oranges, browns, and golds, creating a warm, unified space. While it could be overwhelming, it was also undeniably memorable, every element working in perfect visual harmony. Mirrored walls in dining rooms were a bold attempt to make spaces look bigger and more glamorous. Entire walls would be covered in floor-to-ceiling mirrors, reflecting the chandelier, the table, and the guests. It created the illusion of a much larger space, and it doubled the impact of any decor. Hosts loved how it made their dinner spreads look twice as impressive. Children often amused themselves by making faces in the reflection during formal gatherings. At night, the candlelight and chandelier reflections created a sparkle that made the whole room feel like an upscale restaurant. Dinner parties felt grander when you could see the room stretching endlessly in the glass. Some mirrored walls were made from panels with beveled edges, adding even more sparkle. They were also a practical choice in their own way. No need for extra artwork when the wall itself was the feature. Of course, they also reflected every spill, every crumb, and every awkward expression, but that was part of their charm. In the 1970s, nothing said, "We entertain in style," quite like a mirrored dining wall. Colored bathtubs and sinks were a far cry from today's standard white. Bathrooms in the 1970s came in pastel pinks, powder blues, mint greens, and even bold harvest golds. These colors turned the bathroom into a fully designed space instead of an afterthought. Some homes even went the extra step, matching the soap dishes, toothbrush holders, and light fixtures to the exact same shade. It created a sense of luxury and intention that made the bathroom feel just as stylish as the living room. Even a quick morning routine felt a little more glamorous when surrounded by so much coordinated color. Fixtures matched tile, wallpaper, and even the towels, creating a coordinated look from top to bottom. Stepping into a pink bathtub under matching pink tiles felt indulgent and a little playful. The sink might have chrome legs or be built into a matching colored vanity. People embraced the idea that even the most functional rooms deserved personality. While these fixtures are rare today, they remain one of the most charming and sometimes surprising reminders of 1970s home style. Plant shelves and hanging spider plants were the unofficial mascots of 1970s home decor. Every home seemed to have at least one tall plant stand in the corner or a high shelf lined with greenery, creating a mini indoor jungle. Spider plants, with their long arching leaves and little offshoot babies, were especially popular because they thrived with minimal care. They dangled from macrame hangers in front of windows, their pots often wrapped in colorful yarn or ceramic glaze. The sunlight streaming through the leaves made the space feel alive, like nature had been invited indoors to stay. Sometimes these plants were paired with trailing ivy or ferns, creating layers of greenery that almost became part of the architecture. In open living spaces, plant shelves acted as soft dividers, separating areas while keeping everything airy and light. Guests would admire the lush displays, and hosts would take pride in their green thumb, even if the plants were actually watered by a forgetful teenager once a week. It was a style that blurred the lines between inside and outside, fitting perfectly with the era's love for organic textures and natural shapes. Built-in stereo consoles were the entertainment epicenters of many 1970s living rooms. These were not small, portable devices. They were massive pieces of furniture, often as long as a sofa and finished in dark wood veneer. The console housed a record player, AM/FM radio, and sometimes an 8-track tape deck, all tucked behind hinged panels. Opening one up felt almost ceremonial, as if you were about to unveil something important. The gentle crackle as the needle touched the vinyl was part of the atmosphere, a sound that signaled the start of an evening at home. Friends would sometimes gather just to flip through your record sleeves, treating the collection like a treasure trove. The top would lift to reveal the controls, and the speakers were built right into the sides, covered with decorative fabric grills. Families would gather around to put on a new album, adjusting the bass and treble knobs like they were operating high-end studio equipment. The console often doubled as a display surface, topped with framed family photos, a vase of flowers, or maybe a decorative ashtray. It was as much a visual statement as a functional device, a sign that you took your music seriously. Guests could not help but peek inside, curious to see the record collection neatly stored underneath. In an era before digital playlists, this was how you shared music. dropping the needle and letting the sound fill the entire house. Beaded door curtains were a quirky mix of art and architecture. Instead of a standard door between rooms, you might walk through strands of wooden or plastic beads that clinked softly as you passed. Some designs were simple, with single-color beads. Others formed elaborate patterns, from abstract shapes to full landscapes. The feel of the beads brushing your arms as you walked through added to the sensory experience. Sunlight streaming through the beads could create playful patterns on the floor, making them part of the room's decor. Some households even swapped them seasonally, changing colors or designs to match the mood of the year. The beads would sway gently in the breeze, catching the light and adding a sense of movement to the space. They were especially popular for dividing kitchens from dining rooms or living rooms from hallways. While they did not offer any real privacy, they created a playful, bohemian atmosphere that fit right in with the decade's free-spirited style. Kids loved running through them just to hear the beads clatter together, while adults enjoyed the visual texture they added. Over time, the strands could tangle or lose a bead or two, but that only added to their charm. Beaded curtains were less about function and more about mood, an easy way to make a space feel relaxed and a little exotic. Velvet paintings were bold, unapologetic, and unmistakably 1970s. These artworks were painted on black velvet, which made colors pop in a way no canvas could match. Common subjects included matadors, jungle animals, and of course, the ever-famous Velvet Elvis. The velvet itself absorbed light, making the colors stand out even more vividly. Some were framed in ornate gold or wood frames, adding to their over-the-top appeal. Others hung unframed, their edges blending into the dark, moody spaces where they lived. The deep black background gave every image a glowing, almost three-dimensional quality. Hung in living rooms, dens, or even above the bar area, they were conversation starters in the truest sense. You could not glance at one without commenting, whether in admiration or amusement. The texture of the velvet gave the paintings a richness that felt indulgent, even if you bought them at a roadside stand. In dim lighting, they looked dramatic and mysterious. In daylight, they were striking and surreal. While art critics may have dismissed them as kitsch, homeowners embraced them as part of the era's love for vibrant, unusual decor. Owning a velvet painting meant you were not afraid to make a statement, and that you had a sense of humor about it too. Patterned bathroom tiles floor to ceiling were a hallmark of the decade's fearless design. Bathrooms in the 1970s were often covered in small ceramic tiles from the floor up to the ceiling, leaving no wall untouched. The patterns ranged from geometric repeats to floral motifs, and the colors were just as bold. Think mustard yellow, avocado green, or deep turquoise. In some homes, even the shower stall was tiled in the same bold pattern, creating a completely unified look. The cool, smooth feel of the tiles under your fingertips added to the sense of polish and permanence. A bright, colorful rug or matching towels would often complete the visual, making the bathroom feel coordinated from top to bottom. Even the grout might be tinted to match or contrast with the tiles. This full coverage approach made the bathroom feel like its own enclosed world, a little jewel box of pattern and color. It was both practical and dramatic, easy to clean, resistant to moisture, and visually unforgettable. Stepping into one felt like entering a themed room at a retro hotel. Every surface reflected light in a slightly different way, giving the space a shimmer. Whether you loved it or found it overwhelming, it was undeniably immersive. Flocked wallpaper brought texture to walls in a way paint never could. This wallpaper featured raised, velvety patterns, often damasks or ornate swirls that you could actually feel under your fingertips. The base colors were rich and moody, like deep burgundy, gold, or navy, with the flocking adding a touch of luxury. Choosing the right pattern felt like a major design decision, one that could transform a room from ordinary to opulent overnight. Some homeowners even chose flocking that shimmered slightly under certain lighting, adding to the drama. Walking into a room with it felt like stepping into a lavish lounge or high-end hotel. It was a favorite choice for dining rooms, hallways, and formal sitting areas, instantly making the space feel more upscale. The light would catch on the raised design, creating subtle shadows that gave the walls depth. Installing it took patience, and cleaning it required care, but homeowners were willing to put in the effort for the dramatic result. Guests almost always reached out to touch it, marveling at the texture. Flocked wallpaper was a perfect example of 1970s decor, embracing not just bold visuals but also tactile experiences. Televisions built into wooden cabinets were a blend of technology and furniture. These massive sets came encased in polished wood frames, often with storage compartments or decorative latticework on the sides. They were designed to be permanent fixtures in the living room, not something you moved around. Some cabinets even included built-in record players or radios, turning them into full entertainment centers. The smell of the polished wood and the faint hum of the set warming up became part of the viewing ritual. Children would sit cross-legged on the carpet, mesmerized not only by the shows, but by the sense of occasion the cabinet brought. Some even had sliding doors to hide the screen when it was not in use, making it look like a credenza or sideboard. Families would gather around these TVs for evening programs, the wood cabinet lending a sense of formality to the ritual. The top often held framed photos, decorative bowls, or seasonal centerpieces. It was more than a screen. It was part of the room's identity. The craftsmanship made it feel substantial, and the warm tones of the wood softened the technology inside. In the 1970s, a TV like this was not just entertainment, it was a statement piece. Ruffled toilet seat covers were the epitome of bathroom accessorizing. These fabric covers fit snugly over the toilet lid, edged with frills or lace for a finished look, often matching the bath mat, shower curtain, and even the tissue box cover. They were part of a fully coordinated set. Some sets even went as far as including matching lid covers for the tank and a decorative skirt around the base of the toilet. The fabrics sometimes had padded tops, giving them an almost cushion-like feel when closed. It was the kind of detail that made a bathroom feel dressed, even when no one was using it. The fabrics ranged from plush velour to floral cotton, sometimes topped with a little decorative bow. While they served no real function beyond decoration, they were a sign that the homeowner cared about every detail. Sitting down in such a bathroom felt like stepping into a carefully staged scene. Guests might chuckle at the frilliness, but they could not deny it added personality. In the 1970s, even the most utilitarian fixtures were dressed up for style. Wrought iron room dividers were both decorative and practical. These freestanding or built-in panels featured intricate scrollwork, geometric patterns, or nature-inspired designs. They were used to break up open floor plans without closing off spaces entirely. Some were adorned with colored glass or small decorative tiles, giving them an even more eye-catching presence. The weight and sturdiness of the iron made them feel permanent, even if they could technically be moved. Homeowners often used them to create a sense of zones in a single room while still letting conversations flow across the divide. Painted in black, white, or gold, they added a touch of drama while still letting light and air pass through. Often placed between a living room and dining area, they became focal points in their own right. The sturdy metal construction meant they lasted for years, even decades. Homeowners liked that they could change the look of a space without committing to a solid wall. The craftsmanship and detail in the designs reflected the era's appreciation for ornamental touches, even in functional pieces. Recessed conversation lighting was all about creating mood. Instead of a single overhead fixture, homes installed clusters of recessed lights aimed at specific areas, especially sunken living rooms or conversation pits. The soft pools of light made the seating area feel intimate and inviting. Some homeowners went further, pairing the lights with dimmer switches or colored bulbs to match the mood of the gathering. The glow could turn a casual chat into something that felt special, almost like being in a private lounge. Guests often noticed how flattering the lighting was, making everyone look a little more glamorous. Dimmers allowed you to set just the right ambiance, whether for a lively party or a quiet evening. The light reflected off the low furniture and plush carpets, making colors appear warmer and more saturated. It was a subtle but powerful tool for shaping the feel of a room. In an era that valued both style and atmosphere, recessed lighting was a perfect match. Phone nooks in hallways were one of those small but memorable features that told you exactly what decade you were in. In the 1970s, having a dedicated spot for the family landline was considered both practical and stylish. These nooks were often built right into the wall, complete with a little shelf for the phone itself, a notepad and pen for taking messages, and maybe even a tiny drawer for the phone book. The space was usually positioned in a hallway or just off the kitchen, somewhere central so everyone could hear it ring. The phone's coiled cord would stretch halfway down the hall if you tried to talk in private, looping back on itself in tangled spirals. Wallpaper or wood paneling often surrounded the nook, giving it a framed, intentional look. Sometimes there was a matching chair or stool, though sitting for too long on those narrow seats could be uncomfortable. This was the hub for all incoming and outgoing news. Birthday invites, gossip, emergencies, and the occasional misdialed number. Kids would sit cross-legged on the floor nearby, twirling the cord as they talked to friends, while parents leaned against the wall with one arm crossed. Even the sound of dialing a number on the rotary phone is part of the memory, each click echoing softly in the hallway. These nooks were more than just a place to house a phone. They were little stages where some of the decade's most ordinary and most important conversations took place. Push-button light switches felt downright futuristic in the 1970s, especially compared to the standard flip switches most people had grown up with. These small square or round buttons sat flush against the wall plate, and you would press one side to turn the light on and the other to turn it off. There was something satisfying about that smooth, almost silent click, different from the snap of a toggle. Often the buttons were paired with decorative wall plates in brass, chrome, or plastic designed to match the room's style. Some homes had them wired to control multiple lights or even outlets, which felt like high-tech convenience at the time. Guests would sometimes fumble, unsure how to work them if they were used to regular switches, which only made them more of a conversation piece. In an era that embraced little innovations in everyday life, these switches stood out as a subtle but stylish upgrade. The buttons aged well too. Many still work decades later, though they might yellow slightly with time. They were the kind of detail you might forget about until you saw one again, and then the memory of pressing that cool, smooth button came rushing back instantly. Knob and tube style chandeliers in the 1970s were not the old-school wiring system the name might suggest. They were ornate, often oversized hanging light fixtures that used a combination of globe-shaped bulbs and curving metal arms, sometimes with porcelain or ceramic detailing. These chandeliers were statement pieces meant to hang over dining tables or in entryways, instantly catching the eye of anyone who walked in. Many had a warm brass finish or were painted in muted gold tones designed to glow in the soft light they cast. Some included dangling glass prisms or beads, catching and scattering light across the walls in little patterns. The bulbs themselves were often in unique shapes, flame-tipped, globe, or candle style, adding to the decorative feel. Homeowners liked them because they were both functional and glamorous, a little touch of fancy in an otherwise casual space. Cleaning them, however, was a chore, as each curve and detail collected dust over time. Still, when lit during a dinner party, they made the whole room feel warmer, richer, and more inviting. They were a subtle reminder that lighting in the 1970s was as much about mood and personality as it was about illumination. Door chimes that played full tunes were a delightful bit of over-the-top technology for the time. Instead of a simple ding-dong, your guests might be greeted with a short melody, sometimes classical, sometimes quirky, and sometimes seasonal if you swapped out the chime card. The mechanism was usually hidden inside a tall wooden box mounted on the wall, often in the hallway or near the front door. Inside were metal chime tubes, or a small electronic sound unit that could reproduce more elaborate notes. Families would pick tunes that felt them, whether it was a cheerful jingle or something more formal. Some units had multiple settings, so you could change the melody whenever you wanted, impressing visitors with your high-tech doorbell. Kids loved pressing the button repeatedly just to hear the song play over and over. much to their parents' annoyance. At parties, the chime often became part of the fun, everyone recognizing the first few notes as someone arrived. The novelty never wore off entirely. Even after years, it was still more fun than a standard two-tone bell. This was the 1970s after all. Why settle for simple when you could have a doorbell that turned every arrival into a little performance? Textured popcorn ceilings were a hallmark of mid-century and 1970s construction, loved for their ability to hide imperfections and add a bit of acoustic dampening. The ceiling surface was sprayed with a thick, bumpy texture that resembled, well, popcorn. Under certain lighting, the peaks and valleys caught shadows, giving the whole ceiling a soft, diffused look. Builders liked it because it was quick to apply and covered up flaws without much effort, while homeowners thought it added character. It was often painted bright white, making the texture stand out even more. You would lie on the couch staring up at it, sometimes picking out shapes in the patterns like you would with clouds. Cleaning or repairing it was tricky, as brushing against it could make the texture crumble away. In later decades, popcorn ceilings fell out of favor for smoother finishes, but in their time they were considered modern and stylish. They gave rooms a distinctive, cozy feeling, and their practical benefits meant they showed up in living rooms, bedrooms, and hallways across the country. Even if you have not seen one in years, the memory of that strange, puffy texture probably comes back the moment you hear the phrase popcorn ceiling. Before there were curling wands, flat irons, and hair straighteners with 10 settings, there was one holy grail of home beauty, the built-in hairdryer chair. That is right, just like the ones at the salon. These were dome-shaped dryers, fixed right into vanities or dressing tables, and they were everything. Sit down, flip a switch, and suddenly your head was enveloped in a low hum of warm air. These machines were especially popular in the 1950s and 1960s when hairstyles like the beehive or the bouffant required serious volume and serious time. The dryers were sleek, futuristic, and a little noisy, but they got the job done. Housewives would sit under them while flipping through magazines, sipping coffee, or catching up on the neighborhood gossip. Some units were even foldable, tucking away neatly when not in use. Today, we think of beauty appliances as portable and handheld. But back then, hair care was an event, and the home adapted accordingly. These built-in dryer chairs turned the average bathroom into a personal beauty parlor. Sadly, they went the way of Aquanet and home perms. But speaking of gossip, let us head into the hallway because the next stop is where stories were shared, secrets were spilled, and teenage hearts skipped a beat. Blank VHS tapes were not just empty plastic boxes. They were treasure chests, the kind you could label, relabel, and fill up with your own little corner of television history. You remember the sound, right? That whirring click as the VCR accepted your latest recording project, whether it was The Muppet Show, a Disney movie airing on Saturday night, or just some random commercials you ended up watching later like they were rare artifacts. Back then, taping something off television was serious business. You had to time it perfectly. Hit record at just the right moment, or risk catching the tail end of a news anchor saying, "And now," before your show started. Fast-forwarding past commercials felt like a power move. Rewinding? An art form. And if you had one of those little tape rewinder machines shaped like a car, you were basically living in luxury. You wrote on those little white stickers with a level of care that rivaled school projects. Do not tape over. Disney only. Toys R Us ad. Keep forever. And when someone in the house recorded over your stuff with a football game, that was war. But if you wanted to really test your patience and your brain power, there was only one screen-based challenge that ruled them all. Choppers in the 1970s were not just bikes, they were statements, and the louder and longer the fork, the bolder the message. You would see motorcycles with 6-foot extended forks cruising down the highway like something out of a comic book. These things had no front brakes, almost no suspension, and about as much handling control as a brick on roller skates. But nobody cared. They looked cool. And back then, looking cool was more important than stopping safely. Builders would chop down factory models, stretch out the frames, and slap on as much chrome as humanly possible. The longer it looked, the better. Riding one meant you had guts, or just no fear of potholes. Amazingly, these were all street legal. You could register a motorcycle with modifications that today would not make it past a parking lot inspection. There were no federal mandates on motorcycle geometry or braking systems. If it ran, it rode. Eventually, the law caught up, and these extreme builds got shut down by new regulations. But at the time, choppers were everywhere, from biker rallies to small-town roads, rolling art with no regard for physics. If you think that sounds wild, wait until you picture someone doing their weekly grocery run on a riding lawnmower. The promise of modular furniture was simple: flexibility, creativity, and smart design for small spaces. What we got instead was a collection of flimsy particle board pieces that wobbled with every move. These were the stackable shelves, folding tables, and interchangeable couch systems that dominated catalogs in the 1970s. And on paper, they made sense. Custom configurations, easy to rearrange, and light enough to move around by yourself. But there was a reason they were light. They were also fragile. The locking mechanisms broke, the cheap finishes peeled, and what looked cool in the store rarely held up under the daily wear of real life. Coffee tables would sag in the middle. Bookshelves leaned like tired soldiers. Even the stylish-looking modular couches were uncomfortable and awkward to clean. Some homeowners embraced the idea at first, charmed by the sense of innovation. But over time, the frustration set in. The dream of flexible living turned into a house full of disposable furniture. And if the modular design failed to impress, the next status symbol at least came with its own built-in glamour, until nobody wanted it anymore. The hand-crank egg beater was a rite of passage. Long before mixers plugged into walls, children stood on stools beside their mothers, gripping the cool metal handle and turning the crank with both hands. The beaters would spin in a blur, blending sugar, eggs, and flour into the thick beginnings of birthday cakes and pancake batter. It was not efficient, but it was intimate. You felt the recipe coming together. Your arms grew sore, but your heart grew full. The egg beater did not make noise. It did not break. It did not ask for anything but effort. Every kitchen had one, usually tucked in a drawer next to the wooden spoons and measuring cups. Its clinking metal gears were as familiar as the smell of vanilla extract. And somehow, everything tasted better when it had been beaten by hand. Then came stand mixers, food processors, and digital timers. The crank beater was cast aside as outdated, inconvenient, old. But in that loss, something human disappeared. Now it hangs on antique shop walls, a symbol of effort, patience, and care. It taught us that food was not just made, it was earned. Why did we stop believing that some things are better when you feel them in your bones? It is one of those things you barely notice until it slides into action: pocket doors. Unlike the typical swinging door, pocket doors vanish into the wall when opened, like a magic trick you can walk through. They were the height of clever home design in the mid-20th century, especially in homes that wanted a clean, modern look without bulky doors breaking up the space. You would find them separating dining rooms from kitchens or closing off formal living rooms when company arrived. Over time, though, they became a pain. The tracks jammed, the rollers squeaked, and once one went off its rail, good luck fixing it without tearing open the wall. Slowly, builders turned back to swing doors, and pocket doors became a quirky throwback. But if those walls could talk, they would whisper about family dinners, polite goodbyes, and the satisfaction of sliding a whole room out of sight. Now, speaking of questionable style choices, wait until we step into the softest, strangest room in the house: the bathroom. In the 1970s, tourist towns across America fell in love with the exotic charm of tuk-tuks and rickshaws, those little three-wheeled wonders that looked more at home in Bangkok than on a beachfront boulevard in Florida. But there they were, buzzing around like mosquito-sized taxis, legally driving alongside full-sized cars and trucks. Some were imported directly from Asia. Others were homemade contraptions cobbled together in backyard sheds using scooter engines and whatever metal scraps were lying around. They barely had suspension. Their top speed was a hopeful 25 miles per hour, and turning corners felt like rolling dice. But city officials thought they were charming, tourists loved them, and for a brief moment, they were as American as funnel cake. You could drive one of these with nothing more than a regular driver's license and a little bit of nerve. No airbags, no crumple zones, no real doors, and sometimes no roof either. They were part carnival ride, part cab, and somehow fully legal. Eventually, rising safety concerns and tighter import regulations shut them down on public streets, pushing them into novelty rides at festivals or private events. Still, for a while, you really could get picked up from your hotel in a tuk-tuk. And if that sounds sketchy, imagine cruising through a rainstorm in a car that did not even come with windshield wipers. Taping songs off the radio was a sacred mission. You would sit for hours next to your boombox, finger hovering over the record button, praying that the next song would be the one. And when it was, you had one shot to catch it clean, no static, no interruptions, and above all, no DJ talking over the intro. But of course, they always did. The opening notes would hit, your heart would race, and just as you hit record, that was the latest from Madonna. Coming up next, we've got... And just like that, your perfect mixtape moment was ruined. You would yell at the radio like the DJ could hear you. Why? Why do you do this to me? It was a battle of timing and nerves. Some kids got sneaky and recorded during the night shift when the hosts were quieter. Others became masters of timing, predicting when the chorus would drop, when the ad break would hit. It took real skill. And even if you missed a few seconds of the intro, you still labeled the tape like it was gold. You were not just building a playlist, you were capturing a moment. Free music, sure, but earned through effort, patience, and pure willpower. And if you were serious about your song collection, you were not stopping at one track. You were building an entire soundscape, one emotional banger at a time. Plastic laminate countertops were everywhere in the 1970s, bright, glossy, and available in an endless parade of colors and faux textures. From butcher block prints to swirling marbles, these surfaces were supposed to look fancy without the fancy price tag. And for a short while, they did. But the plastic finish scratched easily, melted under hot pans, and chipped if you dropped anything heavier than a spoon. The edges would start to curl, the seams would swell, and if water got underneath, the entire counter could buckle. Once the damage started, there was no easy fix. Families either lived with the bubbling mess or had to replace the entire slab. Still, for a generation strapped for cash but hungry for style, laminate was the default. It felt modern until it very suddenly did not. And when people stepped outside to escape the chaos of the kitchen, they were often met with a patio that was just as frustrating. The butter mold was once a quiet symbol of pride that lived in farmhouse kitchens and rural homes across the country. Before butter came in sticks wrapped in wax paper and stacked in supermarket coolers, it was made by hand, from cream churned for what felt like hours. But churning was only half the ritual. The real finish came when that butter, thick, golden, and soft, was pressed into a hand-carved wooden mold. These molds came in all shapes and designs: roses, wheat stalks, stars, initials. Some were simple, some were intricate, but all of them said the same thing. This was made with care. They were not just decorative, they were a mark of identity. In local markets and community fairs, families were recognized by their unique butter stamps. It was not branding, it was heritage, a kind of craftsmanship that was passed down like a recipe. Butter molds were rinsed, dried, and stored in the coolest cupboard. They were cleaned with a toothbrush, handled like treasure. Today, you will find them dusty on antique shelves, mistaken for cookie presses or quaint kitchen decor. But they were never just for show. They were the final touch to a process that took time, patience, and love. When did we stop honoring the beauty in what we used to make by hand? That was thanks to ceiling-mounted radio speakers, built-in audio systems that piped mono sound into every room of the house. They were a mid-century dream, a touch of Jetsons-style modernity, long before smart homes were even an idea. The radio unit was usually installed in the kitchen or living room, with a big dial and a few large buttons. You could pick a station, adjust the volume, and suddenly, the whole house was in sync. Of course, these systems had limitations. There was no surround sound, no playlists, just whatever the station was playing that day. But at the time, that was luxury. It was like the house had a voice. Eventually, stereo systems, boomboxes, and personal devices replaced the need. But if you ever stood under one of those tinny speakers and listened to Glenn Miller on a crackly station, you knew you were living in the future. Speaking of visions of the future, what about a bathroom that was all one color? If you were a kid in the 1970s and you did not have a gas-powered minibike, were you even really living? These things were like pocket-sized motorcycles. No license required, no helmets expected, and no real supervision in sight. You would see kids as young as 10 zipping down sidewalks, through alleyways, and even across busy intersections, acting like they were in some kind of stunt show. The engines were loud, the brakes were questionable, and the safety gear was usually just a baseball cap. But nobody really cared. Parents would wave from the porch and tell them to be home by dinner. And the best part? These bikes were cheap enough that a few months of lawn mowing or paper routes could get you one. Police might stop and give a warning, but more often than not, they would just shrug and let you ride. It was pure chaos disguised as childhood freedom. Today, if you so much as start one of these in a neighborhood, someone is calling the authorities before you hit second gear. But back then, it was just how kids got around. Now imagine that same freedom, but with full-grown adults riding choppers that looked more like medieval jousting weapons than actual motorcycles. Saturday morning cartoons were not just shows, they were rituals. You would wake up at 6 or 7, bowl of cereal in hand, and stake out your spot in front of the television before anyone else in the house even stirred, pajamas still on, eyes still half shut. But you were ready. The networks fought hard for your attention. ABC, NBC, CBS, they all rolled out animated powerhouses like The Smurfs, He-Man, The Real Ghostbusters, Gem, G.I. Joe, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Each show had its slot, and missing one felt like missing a holiday. But for every golden episode came the heartbreak of your favorite show being bumped, or worse, replaced. The dreaded special news report could interrupt your flow like a slap to the face. You would sit there in disbelief as your cartoon got pulled for a political debate or weather update. No warnings, no mercy. Still, the lineup gave you something to look forward to all week, and for those few hours, everything felt right in the world. Cartoons, cereal, and commercials that somehow got stuck in your head forever. Because let's be honest, there are still jingles from that era that we can sing from memory, word for word. Sunburst clocks, brass peacocks, oversized metal sculptures of sailing ships. If it glittered and could be nailed to drywall, it was probably up there. Wall decor in the 1970s took the loudest ideas from mid-century modern and cranked them past 10. The Sunburst clock especially became the crown jewel of every living room, often mounted above a fireplace or a sagging plaid couch. It was supposed to say, "Sophisticated modern family." But what it actually said was, "Time stopped in 1973." These pieces aged fast. Dust built up in the corners. The faux gold finishes dulled. And eventually, people began to question why a clock needed 20 sharp metal rays stabbing out into their personal space. Like so many things from the 70s, it was a style built on boldness. And boldness is a hard thing to live with, especially when it came in shades of burnt orange and baby poop brown. The Philco Predicta television looked like it belonged in a spaceship, not a living room. Its bold design, featuring a separate swivel screen perched atop a futuristic base, turned heads the moment it arrived in 1958. This was not just a television. This was the future. The Predicta came in a range of pastel colors, with names like Holiday and Pedestal. It was slim, sleek, and shockingly modern in a time when televisions still looked like wooden trunks. For the first time, you could turn the screen without moving the entire cabinet. It was clever. It was playful. It made you feel like tomorrow had already arrived. But the beauty came at a price. Technicians hated servicing it. Components wore out quickly. Still, families loved it. They gathered around it, cross-legged on shag rugs, watching black and white broadcasts with wide eyes. It made television magical. Not background noise, not distraction. Magic. But magic is fragile. And soon, newer sets with fewer quirks replaced it. The Predicta faded into memory, too strange for the mainstream, too delicate for time. Now it lives in vintage stores and collectors' basements, quietly glowing with nostalgia. How did the most visionary television of its era become a footnote in history? Back in the days when phones had cords and privacy was a privilege, every hallway had a throne, and it was called the gossip bench. This was not just a chair. It was a hybrid masterpiece, a small wooden seat attached to a side table, designed specifically for long, dramatic phone calls. These benches were often placed right by the hallway phone nook, and if you were a teenager in the 1960s or 1970s, this was your favorite spot in the house. You would sit there for hours, twirling the phone cord, whispering about crushes, repeating, "No, you hang up," while your siblings paced in the background waiting for their turn. Some benches had a little drawer for pens and paper. Others had cushions and floral fabric, showing just how serious folks were about comfort during those marathon chats. It was furniture that served one purpose: conversation. But as phones got smaller, and then wireless, and then fit in your pocket, the gossip bench faded away. Today, they are vintage novelties. Back then, they were the nerve center of the household. And while you chatted away about school dances or new neighbors, something else might have been happening overhead. Quietly, from the ceiling, playing your favorite song. Imagine this. It is Sunday morning. You are eating breakfast, and faintly from above your head comes the sweet hum of big band music or the evening news. Believe it or not, in the 1970s, it was possible to drive a brand new vehicle or a custom-built kit car without windshield wipers or washers. Some models, especially custom or minimalist designs, just left them out entirely. It sounds impossible today, but at the time, they were not always considered essential safety equipment. Builders prioritized style and speed over visibility and common sense. You might see a slick fiberglass roadster with chrome finishes and not a single way to clean the windshield. Drivers would keep a rag on the dashboard and physically wipe the glass at stoplights, assuming they did not just lean out the window and squint through the rain. There were even people who used Rain X or wax to repel water and called it a solution. Inspectors? Barely existed in some states. Wiper blades were seen as optional for sunny day cruisers, and if you were unlucky enough to hit a downpour, well, you just pulled over and waited it out. Nowadays, having wipers is the bare minimum requirement to get on the road, and most vehicles even have advanced washer systems with heated nozzles and speed-sensitive settings. But back then, if you were driving something custom or stripped down, you might not have even noticed they were missing until the clouds rolled in. You thought that was risky. Just wait until we get into the world of go-karts with lawnmower engines tearing up the neighborhood streets. Made-for-television movies in the 1980s were not just filler. They were events. Whole nights were planned around them. When that promo would come on, this Sunday, only on ABC, you would perk up, lean in, and make mental notes to not miss it. This was before DVR, before pause buttons. You missed it? You missed it. These movies had titles like The Day After, V, The Final Battle, or The Ewok Adventure. Some were tearjerkers, some were thrillers, some were straight-up terrifying, and they had you glued to the screen, wondering how they managed to squeeze so much drama into 2 hours. Plus, commercials. Families would make popcorn, dim the lights, and treat it like it was an actual premiere. You watched it live together, and you talked about it the next day at school, because chances were everyone saw it too. They hit different. The music, the narration, even that grainy picture, it all added to the mood. You were not just watching, you were part of something. And right in the middle of those movies came the strange intermissions, ones that could go from innocent to haunting in 5 seconds flat. The step-down bathtub was supposed to bring spa-level relaxation into your home. Instead, it brought stubbed toes, twisted ankles, and more than a few emergency room visits. These sunken tubs looked sleek in design magazines, especially when surrounded by lush ferns and candlelight. But reality hit hard the moment you tried to use one. They were awkward to get into, nearly impossible to clean, and posed a serious risk to anyone with limited mobility. The edge was invisible to the untrained eye, so guests would stumble, kids would fall in, and elderly family members avoided them altogether. On top of that, the plumbing was often complicated. The water lines were hard to access, and the moisture around the recessed area led to mold problems. For a feature that took up so much space, the step-down tub delivered very little comfort in return. And unlike a regular tub, you could not just swap it out. It was built into the foundation. Expensive to install, expensive to remove, and all too easy to regret. But even if you managed to climb out in one piece, your next problem was likely waiting for you in the kitchen. The Teasmade was not just a novelty. It was a revolution in how mornings began. A combination alarm clock and tea maker, it became a fixture in British bedrooms and a curious but beloved import in mid-century American homes. Imagine waking to the gentle hiss of boiling water, the soft clink of porcelain, and the smell of fresh brewed tea wafting through the air before your feet ever touched the floor. The Teasmade delivered this magic through simple but elegant engineering. A timer triggered the kettle. A mechanical arm poured the boiling water into a waiting teacup. No fumbling in the kitchen, no slamming drawers, just warmth and calm. Some models even included a gentle nightlight, glowing softly on your bedside table like a companion. It turned mornings into rituals. But rituals are easy to break. Coffee took over. Digital clocks became the norm. And the quiet grace of the Teasmade was forgotten. Now it exists mostly in memories and dusty attics. But for those who used one, the association is immediate. Peace, intention. A morning that cared for you instead of demanded something from you. When did we trade thoughtful awakenings for jarring alarms and paper cups? You would toss it in and forget about it. That was the beauty of the laundry chute. A small hatch built right into the hallway wall or bathroom cabinet, leading straight down into a hamper, or sometimes directly into the basement laundry room. Just open, drop, and go. These vertical passageways were like magic portals for dirty socks and sweaty gym clothes. No more lugging baskets down 2 flights. No more arguments about whose turn it was. You just lifted the flap and let gravity do the work. Kids treated them like secret tunnels. Parents treated them like a godsend. But like many good things, laundry chutes eventually went out of style. Safety concerns popped up, especially with young kids and pets. And then there was the fire risk, as an open shaft could let smoke and flames move between floors. Add in the rise of compact laundry machines on upper levels, and suddenly the chute became obsolete. But admit it, there is still something satisfying about the idea of chucking a shirt through the wall. And speaking of walls, wait until you hear about the windows that were not exactly windows. Get this, in the 1970s, there was no law stopping you from turning an old school bus into your family's home on wheels. You could snag a decommissioned bus for next to nothing, rip out the seats, toss in a mattress, a couple beanbags, and maybe a stovetop, and call it a camper. No certification, no inspections, no zoning permits, just pure imagination and the scent of diesel. Families would paint them wild colors, load them with mismatched furniture, and hit the road like modern pioneers. They did not have running water. Some barely had brakes. But they were mobile, cozy, and dirt cheap. There was something kind of magical about the idea. Taking your whole life, putting it on a bus, and driving until the road ran out. Today, you would need to pass a dozen inspections just to get halfway down the street. But in the 1970s, you did not need a license to be an adventure seeker on wheels. Now, if you thought turning a school bus into a camper was daring, wait until you hear about the 3-wheeled wonders that are claimed to be safer than a sedan. You had not lived until you beat the Oregon Trail without dying of dysentery. That was the holy grail of 1980s computer gaming. Those chunky gray computers in the school lab, that pixelated map, That relentless text box reminding you that little Timothy had broken a leg and your oxen just drowned crossing a river? Iconic. It was not just a game, it was survival. You learned real-life lessons in that pixel wilderness, like how much meat you could carry back from a hunt, not much, or why you should never try to ford a river without thinking it through. And somehow, we were totally into it. The green and black graphics, the clunky keyboard, the fact that it felt like schoolwork but kind of fun. You would all huddle around one screen, a group of 5 kids making group decisions like mini pioneers, and somehow it felt like the fate of your wagon family actually mattered. It was your first taste of choices in gaming, your first little moral dilemmas. Do you trade clothing for bullets? Do you rest for 2 days? Or do you push on and risk everyone freezing to death? Still, once the school bell rang, it was game over. And if you wanted to know what was playing in theaters that weekend, you did not Google it. You picked up the phone. So which of these unforgettable 1970s home quirks would you bring back into your own space? Drop your choice in the comments, tap like if it sparked a memory, and subscribe so you never miss our next trip back through time.